Okay, everybody. Um, Here we go, starting our first assignment. Okay, in my opinion, the best way to start this class is to get a little practice in with our Wacom tablet and our stylus. So, what I've got here is a quick pencil sketch that I did. Okay, of a couple of characters that I'm going to be they're going to be appearing in a little comic book. Uh, thing coming up pretty soon, probably toward January. Anyway, so I drew up this little sketch of these guys. I'm probably going to throw this on my website for them or whatever. Um, but anyway, it doesn't really matter what you use as a basis for your drawing. As a matter of fact, if you want to just go to Google and take a look at character design sketches or something like that, you can find a bunch of fairly large, uh, drawings to choose from. Okay, so you can just download one of those, any one of these that you can find, and start inking over it. Okay, because that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing basically um, an outline drawing of what we call digital inking. Okay, in the field that I'm in illustration and more specifically graphic novel illustration, we do a lot of digital inking these days. There are there's still some people that hold out and just go traditionally with pen and ink, but most of it nowadays is digital from what I've seen. Okay, so let's get started on this. Okay, we're in Photoshop, of course. Okay, which is what we're going to be using through the semester. This was just a raw scan right from my scanner. I haven't done anything with it yet. The first thing I'm going to do though is it's actually not centered, and that kind of bothers me. So I'm going to go ahead and move this pencil sketch toward the center of the page. The page itself is 8.5 by 11, just your uh, standard paper size. In order to move this thing, though, I got to unlock the layer. Okay, everything that you do in Photoshop is going to be on a layer. Okay, so you want to make sure your layers palette is open. Okay, if it's not, you go to Window, and you can find just about anything that you need. Character styles, all this kind of stuff. Um, Anything that you need. So I've got a layers palette here. I've got a number of stuff that's minimized over here though. These are things that I use a lot. Okay, so you might want to take the time to set up your own workspace. Okay, the default workspace is like essentials, like this. Oh, I can't stand that. Okay, uh, so uh, so what I do is I usually go with the one that's painting. Okay, that's where I started mine, and then I customized it by adding things that I used and getting rid of things that I don't use. Okay. One thing that's going to be really useful too is your history palette. Okay. There's undo, but the history palette lets you go back in your actions. It's almost like going back in time and reverting to an earlier state. Okay, but now back to this. All right, so let's unlock this thing. Just click there. Now it's layer 0. Okay. Now that it's unlocked, I can actually take my move tool and move this about like that or so. If you don't like the checkerboard stuff and all that, it's a quick way to take care of that. And I'm going to take care of that now because I don't like the checkerboard stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to my layers palette, and I'm going to click the plus sign down here. That adds a new layer. I'm going to put that one underneath the pencil sketch. Okay. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to call this background. Okay. Then over here, I'm going to make sure that my fill, or my one color here, is the white is the foreground. That's what's active. If I switch it around like that, it's going to be black. I want that to be white. While I'm on this layer, I'm going to just drop my paint bucket right there. Okay. And that is going to That's going to make my background white. It's just easier to work with that way. And I'm going to go ahead and lock that layer. This layer here, I'm going to double click on where it says layer 0. I'm going to type in pencils. It makes it a lot easier, okay, it makes it a lot easier to do your work and stay organized if you label your layers, okay? If you've got some of the times when I'm doing a piece like a digital painting or a comic book cover or something that's more intricate, I'm going to have a ton of layers, sometimes up to 20 or 25. And you want to make sure you know what layer you're on so you don't mess things up. Okay? Now for this particular job, we're probably just going to have probably just 3 layers. We have a pencil layer and an ink layer, and then the background layer. All right, now one thing I'm going to do too, though, is I'm going to fix this this layer here. I'm going to set this on multiply. Okay. What multiply does is that makes this background white transparent. Okay. You can still see it, but if you draw on the background or a layer underneath that, it will be transparent. Okay. I'm also going to take the opacity down to about 50%. Okay. And that is so when I'm inking, I can see my ink lines better, and I'm not getting confused as to what line's what. Okay, so got this fairly well centered here, the characters at least. I moved it slightly so I'm not creating a tangent between the point of the sword and the edge of the paper. I could move them just a bit more. That's actually center right there. You'll notice that Photoshop has these I call them sort of idiot guides that will come up and show you where things are centered. That works pretty good. That's good enough. All right. All right, now, I'm not going to draw on this layer, though. Okay? Like I said, I'm going to have 3 layers, so I need to add a new layer, and that is going to be this one here. Double click on it. I'm going to call this inks. Okay. Now we're ready to start actually inking. Okay, so let's see. Let's go ahead and click on our brush tool. Now, this is your tool palette right here. If you're not familiar with Photoshop, I would suggest playing around a little bit and seeing what's what. The nice thing about Photoshop is if you hover over a tool long enough, it'll tell you what the tool is. I actually have that turned off on mine because I don't like seeing that every time I'm using it because I know what the stuff is. But anyway, so there's your move tool, there's your marquee tool, this is your lasso tool, magic wand tool. Oh, what's this thing? I forget. One of those tools I never use. Eyedropper tool, paintbrush tool, and so on and so forth. I'm going to click on the paintbrush tool right now. And now notice when I click on this, okay, I got a toolbar up here that changed. Okay, when I was on the default, the move tool, that was the stuff for moving stuff. If I click on my paintbrush, okay, I've got right here my paintbrush presets, and then I've got the kinds of brushes that we have, the softness and or the hardness. You can get a really soft brush, so it's like almost like an airbrush kind of thing, or a really hard one. You got your size here. Your brush can get up to 5,000 pixels, which is enormous. We don't need anything like that. I like to use a 5-pixel brush. It's up to you what you want to use. There we go. Yeah, when I'm inking, I use a 5-pixel brush that is 100% hardness there. One thing you want to make sure that you have set to, okay, is this little thing right here. This looks like a little target. Okay, you want to make sure that's clicked. Okay, because what that will do is that'll make your stylus responsive to your pressure, your pen pressure. Okay, so if you press harder on your stylus, the thicker your line's going to be. And that's a very important thing um, in regards to like line quality and that sort of thing. Okay. Now, right now I'm at 25%. That's, pretty small, kind of zoomed out. This drawing is 300 DPI. That's what I scanned it as. So this is 100% right here. Okay. Um, Sometimes I'll go a little bit closer if I want to get more detail. Okay, and really make things quite fine. But 100% is usually, pretty good. You click on your brush, it looks something like that. Now, let's go ahead and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more and start making some lines here. Oops, look at that. Let's undo that. I still had white clicked in, so I gotta have need black there. So see how it responds to how much pressure I'm putting on the pen. Now you should be able to flip, if your stylus is set correctly, you should be able to just flip it over, and the backside of your stylus, the end of it, should be your eraser. Okay. So we're gonna do a little point there, and if your points aren't exactly right, you can always go back in and change them and stuff too. I think I'll erase that a little bit and go back in and correct that. Something like that. Okay. There. Notice how you can start out light and then, whoops. That happens sometimes if you press a little bit too hard. You'll get the little menu thing that comes up. It's not a big deal. So you press harder, your line gets thicker. Okay. There. Notice how rough my pencil sketch is. That's fine. If you're, if you, like I said, if you want to do your own pencil sketch or your own creation or whatever, that's perfectly all right. As a matter of fact, I encourage it. If you don't want to, if you're not to that point yet, that's all right too. Just find something online. Now, sometimes where I've got some of these lines here, like this line here, I'm not going to do the whole thing because I don't need to. I just want to have that was almost like a guide for where the shape of the nose, the bridge of the nose, how that would look. All right, let's put a little light lines there. I think I'm gonna add a little bit right here. This is the tough guy of the comic strip that I'm working on. This is a throwback to the comic strips of the 1930s, where the main character was not the not the big tough guy, but the what would later become a more like a sidekick. So let's go ahead and that line got a little thick right there. Let's narrow that up a little bit. Now, when I draw mouths, I tend to do it in a few different parts. draw on the corner of the mouth there. I'll make a little arc line, and then I'll make a little check mark next to it. That's just kind of suggests lips without actually drawing the lips. You don't want to draw like you know distinct lip outlines on a tough guy. It makes him look kind of a little effeminate or something. So I'm intentionally making these lines fairly thick. That's so they look like ink lines. All right, let's go ahead and draw on the rest of the hair here. Now, I think I'm probably just going to leave that empty for now. Eventually it's going to be dark, but since we're going to be doing this in color, I just want to do an outline. Okay, so the same is true with some of these shadow lines here. I just want to stick with just a basic outline. If I were doing this as just a black and white illustration, I would start drawing in the shadows and filling those in. Same's true with the hair. Okay. But since this is going to be color, these shadows are going to be, they're not going to be black, they're going to be a shade, a darker shade of the base color, which in this case right here is sort of a flesh tone. Putting in a little bit of neck muscle stuff. Line of the shirt. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. You can zoom out just by using hotkeys. Well, in my case, it's Control plus or minus. So minus, minus, plus, plus. There I'm at 100%. Okay. Sort of putting in a little more detail there. Actually, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. That's where I'm more comfortable working at. Okay. Sorry about that. I had to pause the recording for a moment because my phone went off, which, happens. All right, so going through here, just adding detail, little knobs on this character's armor. Also, the nice thing too about when you're inking, that's when you can make corrections and stuff. So like that line wasn't quite right. And the nice thing about working digitally, if you screw up, like that line there, it's a little off. You just hit undo and then try it again. Whereas when you're inking traditionally, and you get out the whiteout. Yeah, I spent years inking traditionally, and went through tons of that stuff. So this is actually nice. This is actually a Wacom tablet is they're not cheap, but truth is this thing has paid for itself over and over again. My Wacom tablet that I'm using right now, I've had for 12 years. I've never had any problems with it. It's a Wacom, it's an Intuos model Wacom. Like I said, I've had it for 12 years. It's been great. And, art supplies are not cheap. So, there we go. Now, I'm going to put a little extra stuff right there. That's just to kind of hint at the metallic sort of surface that it is. Notice here too, I made slightly thicker lines along the edge. That's That's to kind of suggest that there is a little depth on the scales of these uh, shoulder flaps or whatever they are. If you are a expert in ancient armor, good for you. I'm not sure what these are called, so whatever. There. Okay. It's kind of suggest that a little bit. Now, if the lines seem a little thick and I don't want to say crude right now, remember we're zoomed in at like 200%. So when you zoom out, they actually are going to look pretty decent. A little bit of a heavy hand there. Let's see. Actually, I think sketch, my sketch might have been a little off, but I want to kind of suggest that the armor is going back in space and sort of wrapping around the contour of his shoulder. I'm going to add a little bit of line there too. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. That's at 100%. Yeah, it's looking pretty decent. Okay, we're at 21 minutes. I'm going to pause this briefly, okay, and continue working on this thing. I think you kind of get the idea. And I'll be back when it's a little closer to completion or I have something pertinent to say. Okay, this is a pretty good spot to pick this back up again. Now, as you can see, I've nearly finished doing the outline drawing of this background character. Okay, so let's do this character here. What I want to point out, though, is a little tool that you might not be familiar with. Okay, and that's what I'm going to use to draw this this sword with. Okay, so right down here, this is your line tool. Okay, now there's also an ellipse tool and a polygon tool and all that. So there's okay. Let's go through them. Rectangle tool, rounded rectangle tool, ellipse tool, polygon tool, line tool. Okay, and custom shape tool. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the ellipse tool, okay, because I need to make kind of an arced line here. Okay, so go ahead and click on this thing here. Zoom in a little bit and click back on that. And then I'm going to make my ellipse. Now, what happens is when you make an ellipse, right now the setting is, well, let's see what we've got here. We've got see, it created a new layer, okay? But right now it's got a black fill, which we don't want. Now, so what we can do though is we can actually change that around. The fill's right here, okay? Notice that this little menu thing popped up. I click on the fill. I can click on no while it's still selected. My line thickness is at 3. I can change that if I want. Okay. Let's see. And let's see, there's my mitered edges right there. Okay. But anyway, so let's go ahead and, whoops, that's too thin. Cancel. There we go. All right, so there's my 3. Actually, you know what? I think more like 5 probably better. That's a little closer in line to what we have there. And then let's go ahead and I'm actually going to use a mouse for this. I'm going to click on Free Transform, and that will allow me to change this around a little bit. Now notice that when I'm working on this, it actually looks the line looks thicker than it is. Okay, and that's not a big deal. That's just what that is when it's selected, it just looks a little thicker. All right, so let's make that a little bit longer there, narrower. Okay, so when I click off of it, see the line's actually pretty decent. Move that a little bit more. Retransform again. Oh, no, that's not an angle. It's going to be a little bit different, but that's okay. There, that's probably good enough. All right, so now this is on a separate layer. Okay, so where this is crossing over isn't really a big deal. I can erase that. Okay, but the thing is, if I try and use my eraser tool, which let's see right here, it'll say I can't do it. That's because it's a live object. Okay, so I also can't paint on it. So what I need to do is I need to make it not a live object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my inks layer here, and then I'm going to click on new layer. Okay, layer 1. Okay, and then if I click on this, the ellipse, and go merge down or control E, then it'll be on a layer where it's just a piece of artwork and I can now get rid of what I don't want. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit here so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. Actually, let's use the lasso tool to get rid of the extra stuff that we don't want. Lasso tool is right here. Okay, underneath that is the polygon lasso tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this to make a shape, and then I'm just going to delete that. Okay, so that is gone now. Okay, good. And I'm going to use the same tool, not the lasso tool, but the shapes tool. And I'm going to make a line. I need to make a line that goes from here to here. Okay, nice straight line. And since I already have a separate layer that's not connected to the inks, I can just take that and hit Control E, merge down, and it is now it's just its own sort of shape. I can do the same thing with the rest of this here too. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll click, click. Let's see, right about there, there. So we got nice straight lines there. Okay, there's that old saying, "Oh, I can't draw a straight line without a ruler." Well, you know what? You don't have to. Photoshop's got that all set for you. So let's take all these shapes here that we just created, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key. Shape 6 is still selected. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click on all of them, and then hit Control E, and now they're all part of the same layer. Okay, they're all live, so I still need to put them on that layer there. Okay, now let's just clean this up a little bit. Got a little overlap there. That's an easy fix. And let's go ahead and grab our pen tool again. Kind of close up some of those edges, and let's add a little detail here. I've got little decorative sort of circular shapes that I sketched in. And let's throw in a little bit of this metallic kind of shine thing. You'll notice that if we zoom out here, I've got a little bit of that kind of stuff going on. That's a kind of a comic book convention sort of. I don't mean a convention like one that you would attend, but a tradition. When you have something that's metallic and shiny, you make little black squiggly marks, and to kind of represent, oh, this is metallic, this is shiny. And if you look at metal, it actually does. It is like that. Okay. There. Okay. Notice too, light line, thick line, light line, thick line. Same kind of thing going on with his bracelets there. Okay. All right. So that'll work there. Now I'm going to start inking the main character, and we're at about 30 minutes. So I'll pause it there and turn this thing back on when it's completed. Okay, kids, now you can see that the inking is now complete on this little illustration. Okay, you notice that again, some things that were in the pencil sketch, um, are have been left off. These are just simple trap lines. Among them, like the shading lines and stuff like that. That stuff will be in color. Okay. So yeah, and that's another thing too. If you want to, click the visibility off the pencils, you can see, how sharp and clear the the ink lines are. Okay, we'll pick this up again when we start to add color. Okay, I'll see you then.